The long haulers. 5 years ago, when you'd say long hauler, what would come to mind, right? The truck driver that's sitting there, he's got his coffee, he's got his sandwich, and he's got like 10 hours of driving ahead of him. He's just like listening to some music, Sadly, that definition's changed, right? The long haulers today, the long COVIDs, are the poor people who have just been wiped out and their systems are just stuck and they can't really get their energy back up, right? They're chronically fatigued. They're just wiped out. Some of them can't think, brain fog. Their systems are just ground to a halt and they never really restarted. And it's really, really sad to think of how many poor people are suffering like this. When you look at the data about COVID, and for those of you that watch my discussion with Dr. Elroy Wajdani, this genius of a guy, part of what he talked about in the research that his father, Dr. Karazian, did was look at the epitopes, the proteins on COVID, and then did a match to the proteins in our human body. And they found a disturbingly large match between COVID and our mitochondria. And we talked about this before, how COVID basically knocks out the mitochondria. And when you look at what the long haulers are experiencing, it's basically a mitochondrial shutdown as you die. So it's more like a mitochondrial hit where the mitochondria are like running at 60%? So lights are still on, but it's just nothing is really that bright. And the cool thing is there's actually a lot that can be done about this. And this is the whole purpose of the video. For any of you who know of long haulers, these long COVIDs, when you actually start looking at the elements of the physiology, you're like, oh yeah, this is a big part of it. Not the whole part, big part of it. And there's actually ways to undo that. So CoQ10 is actually ridiculously helpful for stabilizing the mitochondria. Healthy fats of all sorts, coconut oil, olive oil, fish oils, choline are all fantastic for repairing the membrane of the mitochondria because it's fat. Then you've got metabolic cocktails, which have carnitine, CoQ10, B12, alpha lipoic acid, and there's a bunch of them out there that are amazing for recharging the mitochondria. They're not a fix, but they help the mitochondria start running faster, better. There are supplements like PQQ, pyroquinolone, I can't even say it, my tongue doesn't work that well. PQQ, that actually is thought to help regenerate the mitochondria. Intermittent fasting does that. Making sure your blood sugar is under control does that. Eating healthy vegetables with all kinds of phytonutrients actually does that. All of these things can actually help bring the mitochondria back into good health. Now, one of the things that's missing from this conversation so far is what happens to the adrenal glands. And you've heard me talk about that before. The adrenal glands are probably the puniest, most wimpy organs in the entire body. They are so sensitive and they're so finicky. They're so finicky. It's ridiculous. Any little disruptions, the adrenal glands are like, I think I'm just going to go sit down right now. Literally, those are the adrenal glands. Like any little stress, in at least 50% of the population, the adrenal glands just boop, pune out. I have those kinds of adrenal glands. It turns out that about 30% plus of the population has that kind of an adrenal glands. Any stress just kind of boop, throws them off. Adrenal glands go off, what happens? Your cortisol tanks. Your ability to produce cortisol, which is the hormone that wakes you up in the mornings. Without cortisol, it wakes you up in the mornings. What else does it do? It controls your blood sugar. It controls your blood pressure. So for any of you who have taken prednisone, all of a sudden you're like, or your kid has gotten it and they're like, bing, that actually brings up cortisol. It brings up all of the hormones that the adrenal glands produce. And when the adrenal glands are shot, there are so many things that go off balance. And because the adrenal glands are heavily, I can't stress it enough, dependent on mitochondrial function. Because think about how the adrenal glands function. What do? They take cholesterol in, and then they run it through 20 different enzymes and ultimately spit out cortisol. These conversions don't come for free. These conversions don't just happen out of thin air. They're all heavily dependent on mitochondrial function. So when the mitochondria take a hit, guess what? Your adrenal glands take a hit. Now, Taking B vitamins, CoQ10, all of the stuff I talked about is great for getting the mitochondria to run back into healthy form. One of the things that's really weird is probably because the adrenal glands are so wimpy, even when you juice up their energy production, they don't just come back to life. For whatever weird reason, I don't know why, it's just what is. They don't come back to life. Now, if you use certain plants, certain botanicals, like Eleutherococcus, which I've talked about before, it's available at every health food store out there, it's on Amazon, it's everywhere. Eleuthero. When you take somewhere around 500 milligrams, maybe 1,000 milligrams of Eleuthero, what happens is the adrenal glands all of a sudden it's like, bing! Literally, they just pop back to life in the weirdest way. Ribes niger and black currant also does that in a more gentle way. Eleuthero is just like, guys, get going right now, and Ribes niger is like, guys, can you please just get back to work? We really need you right now. Sometimes you want that extra kick. And Eleuthero does that. And what's really cool for the long haulers is when you give them the Mito cocktail, you give them healthy fats, bring down blood sugar, healthy food, lots of nutrients, and throw some Eleuthero in there. All of a sudden, it's like you've got that triple whammy, that triple threat. Nutrition, mitochondrial support with vitamins, adrenal support with Eleuthero. The system starts running much more efficiently than it did, and a lot of people actually feel much better. Now, this is presuming that you don't have mold in your home, you don't have oxalates floating in your system, because oxalates shut down your mitochondrial function in a really weird way. You don't have other stressors on the system. You don't have tons of heavy metals. You don't have other things that are just grinding your system down. So if you were already uber sluggish to begin with, and then you got hit with COVID and now you're just laid out, chances are your uber sluggishness had more to do than just COVID. And this is where talking to a functional medicine doctor, talking to some kind of health expert that understands mitochondrial function, that understands these things, and then can help you rebuild your system to then climb it back up. Because all of this is possible. This is really the whole purpose of this video. All of this is possible. There is no reason why anyone needs to be just laid out. There's no reason why anyone needs to be incapacitated. It is simply us understanding what the heck happened and then leveraging the right tools to undo whatever that thing was to have happened. For some people, it's as simple as taking some CoQ10, B vitamins, and Eleuthero, and you come back to life. And you should all do this under the guidance of your doctor. I'm not here to preach medicine. I'm here to give information. You should all talk to your doctor. If you don't have a doctor, then find someone that you can work with. But there are ways for us to rebuild our systems. There are ways for us to maintain fantastic health. And just because COVID happened doesn't mean it needs to keep continuing into the future. I hope this video helped. I hope this information helps. And I thank you for being a part of this community. Be well. This is Dr. K.